When my own family planned a vacation and forgot to book me a room, I thought it was just a mistake, but I was wrong. What followed changed everything between us. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name's Mara, I'm 27, and I've always been the quiet one in my family. I don't cause trouble. I show up when asked, help when needed, and try not to take things personally, even when it's hard. My mom, Janet, has always liked control. My dad, Russ, is the kind of man who keeps peace by staying silent. And my sister, Brielle, well, she's the star of the family. Pretty, loud, and spoiled in ways she doesn't even notice. When Brielle got engaged, my parents acted like she'd discovered fire. Every dinner turned into wedding talk. Every weekend, a planning session. When Mom suggested a family trip to Savannah, Georgia, to celebrate the engagement, I thought it might be nice. A break from the chaos. Maybe a chance for us to actually feel like a family again. I helped plan everything. Hotels, sightseeing spots. Even sent money to help with the booking. I was the one who double-checked dates and transportation. I guess I assumed they'd treat me like part of the group. That was my mistake. When we finally got to Savannah, the air was warm and heavy with that southern charm. Mossy trees, old brick streets, people laughing over iced coffee. For a moment, I felt happy. But that feeling didn't last long. At the hotel check-in counter, the woman behind the desk frowned at her screen. I see 3 reservations, she said. Janet, Russell, and Brielle. I smiled, thinking it was just a mix-up. There should be one more for me, Mara. She shook her head. Sorry, ma'am. Nothing under that name. I turned to my family. Mom's face was blank for half a second too long. Then she laughed, a sharp, fake laugh. Oh, honey, maybe there was some confusion. You can just stay in our room, right? We'll make space on the couch. The way she said it, like I was an afterthought, hit harder than I expected. Brielle rolled her eyes and muttered, Guess next time you'll double-check before we leave. Dad said nothing, just looked away. That's when I knew. This wasn't a mistake. They hadn't forgotten to book me a room. They'd chosen not to. I stood there, heat rising in my chest, but I forced a smile. Sure, I said quietly. That's fine. Inside, I felt something break. I wanted to shout, to demand an answer, to ask how they could do this after everything I'd done. But I didn't. I carried my bag upstairs and slept on a small couch that smelled like dust and perfume. That night, as my sister laughed in her bed and my parents whispered about wedding colors, I stared at the ceiling and promised myself one thing. I wouldn't forget this. They thought I'd just take it. They were wrong. The couch was small and lumpy, wedged between the wall and the TV stand. Mara tried to curl up, but the cushions dipped under her weight. The room smelled like Brielle's perfume, and the air conditioner hummed too loud. She stared at the ceiling, counting the cracks in the plaster, pretending not to hear her sister's laughter. Guess you should have booked your own room, Brielle said softly, but not soft enough. Her tone carried that smug bite Mara had known since childhood. Mara didn't answer. She pulled the thin blanket up to her chin and closed her eyes. Mom's voice followed. You've always been so independent, Mara. I thought you'd sort yourself out. You can't expect people to do everything. It wasn't an apology. It was blame, dressed up as reason. Dad sat by the window, scrolling through his phone, saying nothing. He hadn't said much since they arrived. He never did when things got uncomfortable. Brielle's laugh filled the room again, sharp and careless. Mom, she's fine. She loves acting like the victim. Mara swallowed hard. Her throat burned, but she didn't speak. Every word would sound like begging, and she'd promised herself she wouldn't give them that. They kept talking, thinking she was asleep. She wasn't. Their voices carried through the dark, light, amused, like the situation was some private joke between them. We told her she could stay home if she wanted, Brielle said, giggling. Janet replied, You know how she is. Always so sensitive. She'll get over it. Mara's chest tightened. They really hadn't wanted her here. This whole trip, the one she helped plan, the one she thought was for family, it was never meant for her. She lay still until the room went quiet, then quietly stood, careful not to wake them. The floor was cold under her feet. She slipped outside, the hallway dim and silent, and walked until she reached the back terrace. Savannah's night air was soft and heavy. The street below glowed with amber light, people laughing faintly in the distance. Mara leaned on the railing, letting the cool metal steady her. Her eyes stung, but she refused to cry. Not for them. Not anymore. She had spent her whole life trying to fit into spaces her family never meant for, always adjusting, always shrinking to make things easier for everyone else. But something inside her shifted that night, something small, steady, and fierce. She took a deep breath and let it out slow. The noise from the hotel faded, replaced by the hum of cicadas and faraway traffic. She didn't know what she would do yet, but she knew one thing for sure. She was done chasing their approval. As she turned to go back inside, she caught her reflection in the glass door, tired eyes but clear. a quiet kind of strength. That was the moment she stopped waiting for them to make room for her. From now on, she would make her own. Morning light crept through the curtains, catching on the empty couch where Mara sat upright, still in the clothes she'd worn the night before. Her family was already gone, off on their scheduled tour, their laughter echoing faintly down the hall as the door closed behind them. She stared at the clock for a moment, then quietly stood, her decision made before she even knew she'd made it. She packed her bag, folded the blanket neatly, and left the room key on the counter. No note, no message, nothing. She walked to the front desk, thanked the clerk politely, and checked out. Outside, the savannah air felt different, lighter somehow. She wandered through cobblestone streets lined with old oaks draped in moss, her shoes clicking softly against the stone. The world was moving around her, but for once, she wasn't chasing anyone's pace. A small sign caught her eye, the Sparrow Inn Historic Boutique Lodging. Its front porch was shaded by vines, and warm light glowed through lace curtains. Something about it drew her in. She walked through the door, greeted by the scent of coffee and fresh bread. The man behind the counter looked up with a friendly smile. "Morning," he said. "You look like you've been walking a while." Mara smiled faintly. "Longer than I meant to." He introduced himself as Eli, the inn's manager. He spoke with an easy calm that made her feel seen without being studied. When she mentioned she needed a room, he offered one with a small balcony and a view of the square. Once she dropped her bag on the bed, she stood by the window for a long moment, watching the sunlight move through the trees. For the first time in years, she wasn't surrounded by criticism or pity, just silence, soft and... That afternoon, she took herself out to lunch at a little restaurant near the river. She ordered exactly what she wanted, no one commenting on her choices or rushing her plate. She tasted every bite, letting the world slow down. Later, she walked along the waterfront, the breeze catching her hair, her reflection drifting across the rippling water. By evening, she'd wandered into a small art gallery tucked between two cafes. Eli was there again, arranging frames along a wall. He recognized her immediately. "Didn't expect to see you twice in one day," he said with a grin. Mara laughed lightly, something she hadn't done in days. They talked about the city, about people, about the strange feeling of outgrowing your own family. Eli listened quietly, then said, "Sometimes the best thing you can do is stop waiting for people to value you and start showing them how much you value yourself." His words lingered long after she left. That night, back at her new hotel, Mara sat on the balcony as the sky deepened to violet. The air was warm, and for the first time, she didn't feel small. She wasn't just hurt anymore, she was awake. Her family thought she'd disappear quietly. They had no idea she was just getting started. 2 full days passed before Mara even glanced at her phone. It sat face down on the small table beside her breakfast plate, buzzing now and then, ignored each time. The calls came in waves, Mom, Brielle, even Dad once, but she didn't answer. The silence felt better than any apology could. While they searched or stewed or whatever they were doing, she was somewhere else entirely. That morning, she'd woken to the sound of church bells from the square, sunlight spilling across the white sheets. She took her time getting ready, choosing a soft dress and walking barefoot for a moment across the cool wooden floor before heading out. Her day unfolded like something she hadn't realized she needed. A quiet spa tucked between bookshops, gentle music, hands that worked the tension from her shoulders until she forgot what it was like to be tense. Afterward, she wandered through the market, trying handmade soaps and honey, letting people's kindness wash over her. No one expected anything from her here. By evening, she sat at a corner table in a small restaurant off River Street, candlelight flickering against glass. She ordered seafood and white wine, listened to the low murmur of conversation around her. It felt strange, almost luxurious, to exist without explaining herself. Her phone buzzed again. She turned it face up for the first time. 12 missed calls for unread messages. "Where are you? This isn't funny. You're being childish, Mara." Then another one, Brielle's tone sharp even through text. "If you want attention, you've got it." Mara locked the screen and set it aside. The waiter brought dessert, a small slice of lemon cake, and she smiled politely, thanking him. No guilt followed, just quiet. The next morning, she overheard 2 hotel employees chatting near the lobby. One leaned on the counter, whispering, "That family from Atlanta? The mom's been complaining nonstop, said her room's too small, the food's too salty, and someone stole her charger." The other laughed. "Yeah, and the daughter threw a fit because the tour bus was late. Whole group's been a nightmare." Mara's hand paused midair, coffee cup inches from her lips. Then she laughed softly to herself. They were exactly who she knew they'd be, unraveling the moment no one was there to absorb their moods. Later, she walked through Forsyth Park, sunlight flickering through the trees, children chasing bubbles near the fountain. She breathed in the warm, floral air, letting herself drift with no destination in mind. Each step away from the hotel felt like shedding a layer of something heavy and invisible. That night, she dressed up just for herself, a dark green dress, hair loose, earrings that caught the light. She dined on a rooftop overlooking the city, the skyline glowing against the night. Down below, music floated from the streets, soft and alive. While her family simmered somewhere in frustration and blame, Mara lifted her glass, a quiet toast to freedom. They'd lost control of her, and they didn't even realize it yet. The restaurant was quiet that afternoon, sunlight spilling through tall windows, the air rich with the smell of roasted herbs and lemon. Mara sat by herself near the back, reading the menu with unhurried calm. She'd come to love eating alone, no judgment, no chatter, no pretending to be small. When the waiter came to pour her water, she heard a voice behind her. "Mara?" She turned, startled. Standing a few tables away was Dean, Brielle's fiancé. His expression shifted from surprise to something almost uncertain. He looked her over, her hair softly curled, her dress neat and elegant, a glow on her face that hadn't been there before. "Mara," he said again, moving closer. "Wow, I didn't even recognize you for a second. You look happy." She smiled politely. "Dean, didn't expect to see you here." "I came for takeout," he said, awkwardly scratching his neck. "The others said you went home." The words made her pause. "They said that." He nodded. "Yeah. Janet told me you changed your mind about coming on the trip. That you had work or something." Her fork stopped midair. "They told you I canceled?" Dean frowned, realizing what he'd just revealed. "Wait, you didn't?" Mara's voice stayed calm, but something cold passed through her chest. "No. I was here. They just didn't book me a room." Dean blinked, taken aback. "Are you serious?" "Brielle said you wanted to stay somewhere cheaper." Mara gave a soft, humorless laugh. That's one way to put it. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. He looked around, as if searching for the right words in the quiet clatter of plates. "I didn't know. I swear. I thought you backed out." "I know you didn't," she said. "It's not your fault." Dean sat down across from her without asking, lowering his voice. "You've always been nice to me. I thought your mom and Brielle were just a little overbearing. But this..." He shook his head slowly. "That's cruel." Mara shrugged lightly, stirring her drink. "That's how it's always been. I stopped expecting anything else." He studied her, something dawning in his expression. "They twist things, don't they? Make you look like the problem." She met his eyes. "It's easier for them that way." The waiter arrived with Mara's meal, and Dean sat back, still looking shaken. "I don't know what's going on with them, but this isn't right. You deserve better than that." Mara's tone stayed even. "I'm starting to believe that." For a long moment, neither spoke. The noise of the city drifted through the open window, the soft clink of silverware filling the silence between them. Finally, Dean said quietly, "They lied to me, Mara. About you. About everything." She folded her napkin, set it aside, and gave him a small, steady look. "Then maybe you should start seeing them for who they really are." As he nodded, a mix of guilt and understanding on his face, Mara felt the last trace of hurt shift into something sharper, resolve. She didn't need to confront her family. The truth was already making its way to them, one conversation at a time. The restaurant was glowing with soft lights, white linen stretched over long tables, silverware lined like a promise of perfection. Laughter floated from one corner to another, glasses clinking, the sound of a celebration carefully rehearsed. Brielle's engagement dinner was everything Janet had dreamed of, elegant, controlled, and full of people who believed the family was flawless. Then Mara walked in. The door opened and conversation faltered. She stepped through in a deep crimson dress that caught the light like wine. Eli had helped her choose it, saying it matched the kind of confidence she didn't need to borrow any. Her hair brushed her shoulders. Her heels clicked softly against the polished floor. Heads turned. Janet froze mid-sentence, her hand tightening on her wine glass. "Mara," she whispered, voice sharp under her breath. "You weren't supposed to be here." Mara's lips curved into a calm smile. "Yeah, I know." She took an empty seat at the edge of the table, moving with quiet grace, as though she belonged there all along. Dean looked up, stunned. His eyes met hers for a moment too long, something unspoken moving between them. Brielle's laughter returned first, forced, high-pitched. "Wow, look who decided to show up," she said, her tone dripping with sugar and poison. "Didn't think you'd make it after, everything." Mara folded her napkin slowly. "Traffic was kind to me tonight." Across the table, Dean kept glancing at her, the confusion on his face deepening. Mara noticed but said nothing. She didn't need to explain herself. The silence around her was explanation enough. Janet cleared her throat, trying to pull the moment back into order. "Let's focus on what matters. Tonight's about family." Mara almost laughed at that word but didn't. Instead, she sipped her drink, eyes steady, face unreadable. As dinner went on, the tension thickened. Every polite smile felt like a fragile cover for something ready to crack. Brielle's voice rose with each passing toast, her laughter louder, her gestures wider, as if she could drown out her own nerves. Dean barely touched his food. His gaze kept drifting back to Mara, and each time Brielle noticed. Finally, Brielle slammed her fork down. "Are you enjoying this little show?" she snapped, glaring across the table. "You just love making things about you, don't you?" The guests shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting between the sisters. Mara's reply came soft and even. "I didn't make the guest list." A quiet murmur rippled through the table. Janet tried to interject, her voice brittle. "Girls, please." But it was too late. Dean pushed his chair back slightly, eyes locked on Brielle. "Did you really lie?" he asked, voice steady but sharp. "About your sister canceling?" No one moved. The air in the room turned still. The hum of music in the background seemed distant now, muffled by the weight of what he'd said. Brielle's mouth opened, then closed. Janet's hand trembled against her glass, and Mara, calm, collected, unbothered, sat back in her chair, eyes fixed on her sister, saying nothing at all. The silence did the work for her. Brielle's chair screeched against the floor as she stood, her voice slicing through the stunned silence. "You just couldn't help yourself, could you?" she snapped, her hands trembling. "You're trying to turn everyone against me." Mara didn't move. Her wineglass stayed perfectly still, the liquid catching the light. Across the table, the guests shifted in their seats, eyes darting between the sisters. Dean's parents exchanged an uneasy glance, sensing the facade cracking wide open. Janet leaned forward quickly, forcing a strained smile. "Brielle, sit down," she whispered. "Let's not make a scene." But Brielle wasn't listening. Her words spilled out like a storm she'd been holding back too long. "She's always been jealous, Mom. Always. Every single time something good happens to me, she finds a way to ruin it." Mara's calm didn't waver. "You think I ruined this?" she asked softly. "I wasn't even supposed to be here, remember?" The room went still again. Janet's face paled. A few guests exchanged confused looks. Dean's mother frowned slightly, sensing something unsaid. "What does that mean?" she asked. Mara's gaze stayed steady. "It means when they booked this trip, they made sure there wasn't a room for me. They told Dean I canceled. They lied so I wouldn't come." A sharp murmur rippled across the table. Brielle's color drained as every pair of eyes turned her way. "That's not true," she blurted out, her voice rising. "We thought you didn't want to." Dean cut in, his tone low and cold. "Stop. I know the truth now." Brielle froze, mouth half open. Janet's composure cracked. "Mara, please," she started, her voice trembling. "You're misunderstanding." But the story had already unraveled. The waiters had stopped pretending not to listen. Guests who'd come expecting laughter and champagne now stared in disbelief. Dean's father leaned forward, his expression hard. "You excluded your own daughter?" Janet's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Brielle sank back into her chair, her face blotched red with anger and embarrassment. "You don't get it," she muttered. "She always makes everything about her." Mara placed her napkin on the table, movements graceful, deliberate. "All I did," she said, "was show up." Dean stood, pushing his chair in quietly. "I need some air," he said flatly. Without another glance at Brielle, he turned and walked out. His parents followed a moment later, leaving a silence that felt heavier than shouting. The dinner that had been meant to celebrate love now sat broken around them. Half-finished plates, untouched wine, the clatter of a single fork falling somewhere near the end of the table. Mara rose slowly, her posture straight, her expression unreadable. She could feel her mother's eyes on her, pleading and desperate. "Mara, wait," Janet called out, reaching a hand toward her. Mara paused just long enough to meet her gaze. "Enjoy the rest of your evening," she said quietly. Then she turned and walked away. The night air outside felt sharp and clean. For the first time, she didn't feel small or invisible. Each step away from that table felt like reclaiming something she hadn't realized was hers all along: her dignity, her peace, her power. The house was still when Mara stepped inside, suitcase in hand. Dust floated through the late afternoon light, landing softly on the wooden floor. It smelled faintly of lavender and something familiar she couldn't quite name. Home, but not the kind that felt safe anymore. Her phone began to buzz before she even unpacked. First it was Janet, then Brielle. Over and over, the same names flashing across the screen. At first, the messages came sharp and accusing. "How could you humiliate us like that? You made a scene in front of everyone." Then, when Mara didn't answer, the tone changed. "Please call back. We just need to talk. You misunderstood." She didn't respond. The silence she gave them said everything she needed to. On the third day, another name appeared, Dean. She hesitated before answering. His voice on the other end was quiet, worn down but certain. "It's over," he said simply. "I called off the engagement." Mara said nothing at first. The sound of her breath filled the pause. "I should have seen it," he continued. "They treated you like you didn't matter, and I kept pretending it was just family stuff. You didn't deserve that. I just wanted to say, thank you, for showing me who they really are." Mara leaned against the counter, eyes closed. You didn't owe me that, she said softly. Maybe not, he replied, but I owed it to myself. When the call ended, she stood in the quiet kitchen for a long moment. The refrigerator hummed, the clock ticked, and something inside her felt lighter. That evening, there was a knock at the door. When she opened it, her father stood there, Russ, hat in hand, looking smaller than she remembered. He shifted awkwardly before speaking. Your mother doesn't know I'm here, he said. I needed to see you. She stepped aside to let him in. They sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the same one where years of small silences had piled up. I should have stopped it, he said finally, voice low. I saw the way they treated you, and I said nothing. That's on me. Mara watched him for a moment before replying. You didn't have to pick sides, Dad. You just had to see me. He nodded, his eyes wet. I do now. I'm sorry. For a moment, neither spoke. The air between them felt heavy but honest. Then she reached across the table, resting her hand over his. I forgive you, she said. He looked up, surprised. You do? I do, she said quietly. But I'm done being the background character in my own life. Her tone wasn't angry, just final. When he left, the sun had nearly set. Mara stood by the window, watching the light fade across the street. The phone buzzed again on the counter, another call she wouldn't take. This time, she didn't feel guilty. She didn't feel alone either. She just felt certain. For the first time, her story finally belonged to her. Weeks slipped by quietly, the sharp edges of the past softening but never disappearing. Mara had stopped counting the days since she left everything behind. Life no longer revolved around calls, apologies, or explanations that never came. The noise of her family's world had faded into a distant hum, replaced by something she hadn't felt in years. It was a crisp morning when she heard the news. A friend from back home called, her voice carrying that mix of shock and curiosity people used when gossip tasted almost sweet. You didn't hear? She asked. Dean's parents pulled out of the wedding, said they couldn't be part of the drama anymore. Mara listened, stirring her coffee slowly. The friend went on, eager to fill the silence. Janet's furious. Brielle's been crying all over town. Everyone's talking about it, how they lied, how everything came out. People are keeping their distance. Mara's lips curved just slightly, a quiet, knowing smile. That's unfortunate, she said, her tone calm. She didn't ask for details. She didn't need them. The image came easily, Janet pacing, trying to regain control, Brielle snapping at anyone who dared to pity her. The two of them unraveling, not from Mara's revenge, but from their own choices. After the call, Mara stepped out onto the balcony of her new apartment. Savannah stretched below her, golden in the morning light. The air smelled faintly of salt and magnolia. Down the street, she could see the sign of the Sparrow in swaying gently in the... Moving there had been an impulsive decision, but one that felt right. Eli had offered her a place at the inn, helping with guests and events. What started as a temporary arrangement quickly became something steady, almost like belonging. He'd taught her how to balance the books, how to read people's moods, how to enjoy small conversations without feeling like she had to perform. Sometimes, during the slower afternoons, she'd sit in the courtyard with a cup of tea, listening to travelers share stories. Each one seemed to carry a piece of the freedom she'd been chasing. She smiled more now, real smiles, the kind that reached her eyes. Her phone still rang occasionally, numbers she recognized but didn't answer. Janet tried every few days at first, the messages alternating between anger and pleading. Brielle sent one long apology that read more like a performance than remorse. Mara never replied. The silence between them had become her quiet victory. She didn't need to shout or prove anything. Living well was enough. One evening, Eli found her on the porch as the sky turned amber. You look settled, he said with a small grin. I think I finally am, she answered. He nodded, pouring her another cup of tea. They'll see that one day. She glanced toward the horizon, her voice calm but certain. They already have. She knew her family would never forget how they'd treated her. That memory would stay with them longer than any apology could. And Mara, she would never let it define her again. The afternoon sun spilled through the wide front windows of the Sparrow Inn, lighting up the polished floors and the soft green wall. Mara stood behind the counter, organizing a stack of guest forms, the faint sound of jazz floating through the lobby. She'd grown used to the rhythm of this place, the quiet chatter, the clink of luggage wheels on tile, the hum of a life she built on her own terms. The bell over the door chimed. She looked up with her usual easy smile, expecting another traveler stopping in from the heat. Instead, three familiar silhouettes filled the doorway. Janet, Brielle, and Russ. For a heartbeat, the air seemed to still. Janet was the first to step forward, her voice uncertain. Excuse me, we're checking in under the name Whitaker. Mara didn't move right away. She simply straightened, meeting her mother's eyes with a calm that made Janet falter. Of course, Mara said, her tone smooth. Welcome to the Sparrow Inn. Russ blinked, confusion flickering across his face. Brielle's smile froze mid-expression. Janet's mouth opened, closed, then opened again. Mara, she whispered, the name sounding like she barely recognized. Mara tilted her head slightly, lips curling into a polite smile. Hi, Mom. Long trip? No one answered. The lobby, usually warm with noise, felt suddenly heavy. Janet's hands fidgeted with her purse strap, her voice trembling as she asked, You work here? Mara leaned lightly against the counter. Something like that. Brielle stepped forward, her voice sharp but shaky. You've got to be kidding me. This is your job. Eli appeared from the back office just then, wiping his hands on a towel. He smiled at Mara, then at the newcomers. Hey, partner. Need help with the check-in? The word hung in the air like thunder. Partner. Janet blinked as though the floor had shifted under her feet. Partner, she echoed. Mara met Eli's gaze, her expression easy. Yes, she said, turning back to them. I co-own the inn now. We finished the paperwork a few weeks ago. Brielle's jaw dropped completely, her face flushing with disbelief. Russ looked between them, silent as ever. Janet's voice broke when she finally spoke again. I don't understand. How, when? Mara's smile didn't waver. A lot can happen when people give you room to grow. No one spoke after that. The sound of the ceiling fan filled the silence, steady and soft. Janet finally tried to recover, clearing her throat. Well, we'd like to check in, please. Mara folded her hands on the counter, eyes steady. Of course, she said smoothly, her tone just a touch brighter. Do you have a reservation? Janet froze, color draining from her face. Brielle stared, speechless. Mara held their gaze for a moment, then glanced down at the computer screen, pretending to type. Her voice was gentle but sure when she spoke again. Because if not, I'm afraid we're fully booked. The quiet that followed was thick enough to touch. Janet's lips parted, but no words came. Brielle's expression shifted from disbelief to humiliation. Mara simply smiled, calm, graceful, untouchable. The room they never booked for her now belonged entirely to her. Do you think I made the right choice by walking away from my family, or should I have given them another chance? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more stories.